All right, these are your notes on the carbon cycle intro, first given on February 14th, Valentine's Day. Carbon is atomic symbol C. It is arguably the most important element on Earth because it is the backbone element for all living things. Remember, you can pause these notes at any point in time. Lipids, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids all contain carbon. They also contain hydrogen and oxygen, at least all four of them do. Here's the difference and why carbon and cycling carbon is so important. Carbon is 0.032% of Earth's crust. Oxygen, by comparison, is 45% of Earth's crust. We have a lot of oxygen. Most of the oxygen is stored as silicon oxide, but there's a lot of it. Carbon, there is precious little, and so it must be cycled. Same thing with the atmosphere. The atmosphere, carbon is stored as CO2, and it is 0.03% of Earth's atmosphere. So it needs to be reused. The way we reuse that is through the carbon cycle and the filling and emptying of different sources and sinks. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The four spheres where carbon is stored is the biosphere, and carbon is stored as compounds such as carbohydrates in living and dead organisms. The atmosphere, carbon is stored in the atmospheric gases like carbon dioxide and methane. Stored in the hydrosphere as calcium carbonate as well as carbonic acid when CO2 mixes with water. And the geosphere, carbon is stored as organic matter in soil, fossil fuels, and sedimentary rocks. Those are the four spheres we will talk about in the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle involves the movement of stored carbon between those four spheres. An area where carbon is stored is called a source. An area where carbon is transferred is called a sink. And any particular sphere, bio, atmosphere, hydrosphere, or geosphere, can act as a source or a sink at any point in time. Here's what I'm talking about with that. Here's our atmosphere. The atmosphere is filled with CO2 and methane. When CO2 interacts with water, the water and CO2 combine to form carbonic acid. So the CO2 started in the atmosphere, the source, and transferred to the hydrosphere, the sink, based on the mixing of air with water for it to then, the carbon to then be stored in the water as carbonic acid. So that's an example of the atmosphere as a source and the hydrosphere as a sink. But the biosphere could easily be the source and the atmosphere the sink. For example, when a forest fire occurs, all of these trees are made out of carbon. When that carbon burns, it releases gases into the atmosphere. Some of those gases are carbon dioxide. So, when the source of carbon-based plants burns, it releases carbon into the atmosphere. The biosphere is the source, the atmosphere is the sink. So anything can be a source or a sink depending upon how they interact with each other. Those are your notes. Come in, email me if you have any questions.